come down from a communication point of view. The cost of startups has gone down dramatically, which means you don't have to go after like the big dollar investment syndicates. Literally, Section 116 is changed by the Canadian government, so way to go, Harper. I know it's an election, but we should give props. You know, that was a good thing for our industry. Makes it very, very easy for U.S. guys to invest in Canadian companies, just like they're U.S. companies. So, you know, there's a lot of things that are changed in a very positive way for doing startups in Canada.
And also, I think investors are basically more open than ever before in Canada. So some people are going to say that there's less investors than before in Canada, and it's maybe not a bad thing, because the investors that we are co-investing with across Canada, guess what? We all have one commonality. We are all doing business with investors from Europe, from the US, from a little bit everywhere. Whatever investor has that additional depth or expertise or knowledge or relationship in a specific space, that's with who we want to co-invest in that specific deal, because that's the additional access and the additional relationship that we're trying to build. So right now, I think that the border is disappearing. C116, I mean, just resolving that issue was a major legal point, but on a practical basis, the relationship now, I mean, like, you're co-investing with guys that want to have, you know, a foot on the ground and somebody to work with the entrepreneur, because when you're, you know, in New York or in the Valley or elsewhere, well, it is a one-day flight, a one-day trip or two-day trip just to come back and forth. Therefore, having those relationships is extremely important, and we're putting a lot of energy in that.
So, you know, because of what's happened over the past 10 years, open source, social networks and whatnot, I mean, the cost to start a business and get it to initial revenues has come down dramatically for most companies. So entrepreneurs have options. You know, there are the accelerators that can get them to product, and then there are the, you know, the craze around the angel investments now that get them to revenue. What as VCs that would come in after, like, what do you think of these different models? What do you think of the accelerators? I mean, have you invested from companies in those, and how do you consider these companies?
So I'm a founding investor and board member at Seed Camp. At Seed Camp, first year was tough to get the quality up, but we had some good companies. Seed Camp second year was getting pretty good, and I think the last two batches have actually been pretty awesome. So Index Ventures has done one with Redpoint called Berkeley on the West Coast. Eden Capital has done about 4 of them in London. And what happens is, so for example, C-Camp unleashed Eastern Europe. So fantastic Estonian entrepreneurs who you'd never heard of, they had no connectivity, and you suddenly unleashed this incredible programming talent and allowed these people to connect very, very fast. And so for guys like that, it was awesome. I was talking to someone who's just going through the McClure incubator and was, you know, raving about. Thank you, Dave. And was raving about the quality that came out of simply focusing on metrics and metricizing a business and the analytics piece, etc., and just the maniacal focus around getting that into the DNA of the company. There are people who rave. I mean, Y Combinator, you know, Drew Houston, who was a star, and I will own up to the fact that, you know, he was in our office as an EIR, and we fucking let him go. You know, one of my partners is in long-term therapy over this. He went into YC and, you know, talks wonders about it. So I don't think the accelerators are for everyone, but do they play a role? Absolutely. Is the quality of mentoring good? It's as good as you're willing to make it. And I think they've played quite a good role. Now, there is also some really shitty early stage initiatives. Mentoring is difficult to do, takes a lot of frontal cortex activity, and there's some dangerous mentoring. Oh, I've seen this before, this is how you need to run your business. You know, focus on selling to the business. Your QA tool is not for the technical people. I mean, I've heard like horrible mentoring as well. So, but I think overall the quality of these initiatives is pretty awesome.
No, yeah.
I think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's a dramatic innovation in how startups are being enabled. The cost of the source code and a lot of the open source stuff is allowed and supported, but and the fact that you can do a startup you can make progress on $50,000. When we got into business in 2000, you know, and 97, it was, you know, you want to start a web company? Okay, here's $10 million. and then they go away for 18 months, and then you find out that the website doesn't work because you had to hire CKS or you had to hire somebody else, and it was just like a huge transfer of money from our investors through us, through the startup companies to these web development companies. Now it's $10,000, and you can do a ton of them, and then you'll know if you've got something in 2 months. It's outstanding. I recommend them highly.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things, and we have the same experience with 48 Hours in the Valley when we bring companies down. I think the entrepreneurs learn as much or more from each other.
Yeah.
Frankly, I mean, it's just like, you know, an agile design philosophy, right? I mean, if you've got two people coding together, they work faster, better, they learn quicker, and I think that's one of the great things about you know, these environments is, you know, you like-minded entrepreneurs that can bang around ideas, get smarter faster.
And coaching and mentoring, you know, is not about telling people how they should be doing it. So, you know, the accelerators today, what's impressive, and you know, you guys are a big piece of this here in Montreal, is the quality of the people that are around are not there to do the job or tell the entrepreneurs how to do their job. They're there to actually push the entrepreneur to his own limits. So of course, the entrepreneur has limits, and you can only develop those limits to the next level and the next level. But having access to people that can actually share experience instead of just sharing their opinion on you should do this. No, me when I did this and this, these are the major hurdles that I hit. But because I talked to X in this department, I got through. Oh, okay, maybe it's different from my sector, but that's how you actually learn and get to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So that's what's awesome, I think.
So, I mean, there's this, and Dave is going to spend, I'm sure, a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to prepare the room for it. You know, there's this big movement, lean startup, and then fat startup. You know, you've got companies like Color, I don't know if you can call that a company, but you know, that released a product, but already raised 41 million without any traction whatsoever. How does these things?
Dave's a big fan of that company, that model.
He is, right?
Yeah.
So now, like, now that you know,
what would Dave say? Let's give Dave's opinion instead.
now that you know the company, you've seen the app. If they let you in, would you come in?
No.
No. No, I can't afford it. But so those kind of companies, if you're Tom Cruise, if you're a famous rock star or a movie star, you can raise $41 million on your charm and good looks. I can't do that. Maybe someone here in the audience can do that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it could end up being a big hole in the ground that you have to recover from. So you start small, and then you iterate, and then you grow bigger and bigger, and then you take on the money when you need to. But
you know, it's fundamentally just a really different way to build a business, and you know, it's not something that's going to happen probably here. Yeah, and Brad and I actually had a funny conversation about it last night, which was, you know, when you first thought about the team that's building that product, and you say, oh my God, like, you know, top to bottom, world-class guys, like world-class guys.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur that I know and love, Peter Pham, is involved in that company, and talked to him and said, wow, that's really cool. And we were talking at CES, and we were talking about where it's going to go, and that's really neat. And then, you know, boom, like, they announced $41 million of financing, and we're going to launch the app the next day. And I get the app in my hand, and I go, what the fuck is this? Like, literally, I mean, we should all try it. Like, you know, everyone should like pull down Color right now, and we'll, as a group experiment, play with it and see if it works just today. Like, start taking some pictures, because I can't, for the life of me, figure out why it's useful. But you know, I could be wrong. And so then I go, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. They're going to waste $41 million on the best team on the planet. And then I thought about it some more, and Brad and I were talking about it last night. He's going, well, that's kind of interesting, maybe. But the cool thing about it is the underlying idea, which is so many sensors. Like I saw this graph recently of the number of devices and the number of MEMS sensors. So devices like this, MEMS sensors like that, right? So every device has like all these sensors, and they're growing exponentially. And so the idea of pulling together a world-class team that's trying to figure out, how do I take advantage of all these sensors to do really cool things? Yeah, the first idea may be completely abysmal, but the third and the fourth might be the one that hits and could be really amazing. So I went from loving it to hating it to loving it again in 3 days.
So I still have dozens of questions. I mean, you guys are a great panel, but let's get the room to give us a few. So, yeah.
Plus, there is the government initiative. So, is that a good thing? Is that influx of money a good thing for a local ecosystem? Can it support it? So, here's my view. I think government money, I'm sorry, is never the answer, right? In other words, there is an obsession with the so-called funding gap. Funding gap, bullshit. Talent gap, success gap, maybe. Funding gap, bullshit. Now, you do need a bit of ecosystem, but you need high-quality practitioners. Now, I've spent time with the Real Ventures guys. I'm getting to know them. Yeah, I think they're pretty awesome, actually. You get 4 accomplished people together as a team. That's great. They're absolutely a good place for the government to put money in. But in general, there is no such thing as a funding gap. There is a success gap and a talent gap, and you cannot kickstart an ecosystem through money. That's the only thing I would say, you know. And too much money absolutely destroys the ecosystem. That's for sure.
I'll completely agree with that. I think if we look at some of the incubators, look at some of the stuff going on in the Valley, they're accomplishing so much with so little. You know, I'll argue that the amount of money that's been raised here and already allocated for Quebec is overfunding this particular geographic area.
Well, it's exactly the same amount that Color just funded. So we could do one company.
Yeah. So you don't need that much money. You need $50, $100, $200,000. I mean, and that's readily available. These guys are great sources, and there are tons of others. Money is not the hurdle here.
There's two answers, or 2 questions actually out of your statement. First one is with regards to the government, and I must say that our Quebec government has learned a lot since the 90s. Out of all of the initiatives that you just outlined, the government is acting as an LP. They're not taking one single decision in terms of the entrepreneurs that are being selected or invested into. The angel investor, the guy is putting his own money in a company, in an entrepreneur, because he trusts that company and he wants to help that company get to the next level. And when he puts $1, there's $2 more that comes from the Quebec government fund that was announced with Ange Québec. Well, for me, from my point of view, I think that's extremely smart. Why? Because the government is actually acting as a catalyst and is not getting in the way of the entrepreneur. And that's actually what was the problem 10, 15 years ago. They were basically in the way of the entrepreneur of actually, succeeding. So on that front, I think our governments are way smarter than they've ever been, and right now they're basically acting as a catalyst, following. So it's not even an expense. They're expecting returns, the same type of returns that the angel investor or any other investor wants to get out of their investment. The ecosystem question, though, is the right question to ask. And do the entrepreneurs in Montreal have the ambition of actually building $100 million companies, or like JS and Chris are talking about the billion-dollar companies? I think we're just touching, we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. We're just touching the ambition, the drive, and the energy that is required to build those type of companies. Can you imagine how much momentum and how much energy has to go into a company and into a product in order to become a billion-dollar company? How much commitment has to be behind that? And are our entrepreneurs ready to commit? Are they ready to risk it all to actually go out and get there? Or are they sitting on a big sofa looking at the guy across the street and say, hey, he got money, why don't I have money? I'm smarter than him. And I'm like, get your ass off the chair and actually prove to the world that you can do it. And you don't need that much money to actually prove it. Once you validate what you're trying to do, that's when you can attract money, be it coming from Quebec, coming from angels, or coming from outside of Quebec. And I think that drive in terms of entrepreneurship, that X factor, is what's going to build our ecosystem.
So one thing, there is a sucky ecosystem, may have sucky entrepreneurs, it's also got sucky VCs. And the EIF in Europe, European Investment Fund, is probably the biggest waste of taxpayer money in the history, right? And why? Because they supported local funds everywhere, because they felt it was their mandate to make sure there was an active local VC ecosystem. And my God, I mean, they basically kept people employed and driving Beamers in Munich, instead of really creating a quality ecosystem. So government intervention needs to be absolutely ruthless about the GPs that it decides to support. The French market is littered with bank-sponsored funds where I guarantee you, the guys move around town like they own the place.